All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here, talking real music in real time for a few real people out there, like two, three, just like you and just like me. I'm talking total viewers out of almost 68. We'll say about 2 out of every 68 watch these videos, which, again, I appreciate you guys doing that. Quintessential by Quint Starkey. No relationship to Richard Starkey, who, of course, is Ringo Starr of the Beatles. The names are spelled differently, the last names. Quint, which is a great first name, has put together one of the best albums of 2023. If you like yacht rock and you want something new for your collection, I hate to just call it yacht rock, but, you know, the Sirius XM yacht rock station. And it's really good. You put it on, you're like one great song after another. Many of these songs just not on the radio as much as they used to be. So Quint, a super just well-written, well-produced album. So go check that out. Also, don't forget to check out Modern Retro Radio, where you will hear new music by older vintage artists, okay? It's modernretrofm.com. Now, speaking of vintage, Paul McCartney is out there talking about John Lennon. He's responding to accusations that he's destroying John Lennon's legacy, or some people would say erasing it. So in a recent appearance, Paul McCartney addressed the allegations of whether he tried to erase John Lennon's legacy, reflecting on the distortions and the need to set the record straight. Paul said, "So I think with all of these distortions that were beginning to happen, there's kind of a revisionism that was starting, I sensed. And I thought, well, look, I don't want to put John Lennon down at all. I mean, I'm his biggest fan. I'm the last person to do this because I really feel privileged and loved every second that we had together." Now, let me just interject here. I'm not sure Paul loved every second that he had with... So that's kind of revisionism, Paul. I mean, there were some awkward times. There were some times where you guys weren't getting along all that well. So to say that you loved every second that you had with John Lennon, I think is a little bit, revisionist. That's what I would say. But he's talking about their songwriting perspective and the partnership they had. He says, I mean, let's face it, to be McCartney in the Lennon-McCartney songwriting partnership was fantastic, but it was a question of me thinking, well, I better stick it down, meaning write it down or talk about it before the memory goes completely, which it's going fast, he said. Even as we speak, it's ebbing away. Yeah, Paul McCartney now in his 80s, and I think he's probably being sincere. So he continues, he says, and I better get with someone I know and trust like Barry Miles, who wrote the book, to actually just put forward my side of things. Because the kind of thing that started to happen was George Martin wrote a book called The Summer of Love, and he asked me to proofread it just to see if his memory was the same as mine. And he got to a song called Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. And he said, well, this was John's song completely. John wrote this, very typical of John. So I had to ring him up. I said, George, no, it was John and I. We sat down. I contributed half of the song. Now, most people, when they think of that song, it is a quintessential John Lennon type of song. So even George Martin was like, hey, this is a John Lennon song. And McCartney's like, no, it's 50-50. And this is how McCartney remembers writing the song. He says, I remember arriving at John's place. It was in the book where he had this little drawing that Julian, his son, had done. And across the top of it, in this very naive children's writing, was Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. John said, what about that for a title, huh? I said, fantastic. He said, come on, let's go upstairs and write it, which we did. But things like that, where it's almost a better story that John wrote Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds himself, and that the song, it's attributed to LSD. Of course, those legends have grown over time, but McCartney says, unfortunately, it's not true. Later during the same conversation, McCartney clarified some other things. So that was basically the idea. I thought, well, whether people believe me or the revisionism, it doesn't really matter to me, but I think I ought to get it down. Now, if it didn't matter to Paul, I don't think he would be trying to correct the record. And there have been other instances where McCartney has stepped forward and said, no, I actually had something to do with this song. And a lot of people, they resent the fact that Paul McCartney is who he is, and that he ended up being the dominant figure in the Beatles. I'm not going to say he's necessarily the only genius in the room. I think it's a matter of, different geniuses. I think McCartney was the most vocal. He was probably the alpha guy in the room. But to say, for instance, that George Harrison, which isn't really talked about, George isn't really talked about here, should play second fiddle to anybody as far as creativity and musicianship and songwriting ability. It took a few years, but people started to realize how amazing George was. And I'm thinking of the two guys, Lennon and McCartney. Paul McCartney, especially if you look at his solo work and, decades worth of putting music out there. And of course, John Lennon can't compete with that for a number of reasons. Number one, he's not here. He's been dead since 1980. And I think a better topic would be to get to the bottom of, why John Lennon was shot, and did someone have a hit out on John Lennon because they didn't like his opinions on certain things. These accusations have been around now for a number of years, and I think somebody should do some real investigative journalism there, and I think the rabbit trail might lead back to the federal government here in the United States. It might not. It might just be, more conspiracy theories and nothing really to see here. But in the case of Paul McCartney, yeah, the guy burps out great music, all right? He just has this ability to come up with incredible melodies, and the combination of himself along with John Lennon, where John, of course, this is his element, kind of this 1967, mushrooms and towering flowers and so forth. I mean, this is the epitome of the Summer of Love. And I think both guys took advantage of that when they wrote the song, and they're both geniuses. Some people like John Lennon's idealism more than they like Paul McCartney's more straight-laced, business as usual type of persona. But back in those days, I think all four of the Beatles were kind of out there, So in any event, should Paul even correct the record at this point? Does it matter? I think it does matter. I think you need to get the story right. And if McCartney wrote half the song, he wrote half the song. If this is the story that needs to be told because it's true, then people need to hear it. And for Beatles fans who want to favor one guy over another guy, when the Beatles were at their best, it was a team effort. And when it wasn't a team effort, that's when things started to unravel toward the end. But still, arguably, some of the greatest songs ever written that can't be touched. All right. Elton John does a cover of Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and I'm just like, why? Why? I mean, he does an okay version of it, but the original, go back and listen to Sgt. Pepper sometime. Just go back and put some headphones on and think of 1967 and the limited technology, but the music is right there, and it actually, to me, sounds better than about 95% of the stuff I hear today. It just does. It's got a warmth to it, although now we've remastered everything a couple of times, and in some cases we're starting to doctor it up a little bit or change the compression on it, or, you know, the 2021 remix of some Beatles songs. You know what? I just want to hear the originals in all their glory, the way Paul McCartney and John Lennon wrote and composed them, along with George Martin, who obviously was a genius, and that combination, just amazing. So anyway, folks, I don't know how you feel about this. I'm kind of concerned because revisionism, it's a big deal, especially with regular news. History, you know, history is being revised all the time. And then people are told the same thing over and over again, and they just believe it because nobody is there to correct the record. So I applaud Paul McCartney for correcting the record. For those of you who think he's a little bit pompous and this is his motivation, I don't know. I think if somebody says something that's not true and you know it's not true, even if you are a little bit pompous and full of yourself, I think it is still okay to correct the record. So Paul McCartney doesn't want John Lennon to be erased. He says, hey, it's good if people believe the legend. It's fine. It's almost a better story that he wrote the entire song, but truth is he didn't. Here's a guy, I think, who wrote all the songs on his latest album, Quint Starkey, and his album Quintessential. I really like this album a lot. Late 70s, early 80s vibe to it. Adult contemporary. Yes, if you've got a large boat, right, and you've got a big stern on your boat where everybody hangs out, or a bow, could be a bow, anywhere, a cabin, you could hang out and you could be listening to Quintessential by Quint Starkey. Again, yeah, it's yacht rock, okay? Feel better? It's yacht rock, and it's good, so check it out. Don't forget to check out Modern Retro Radio. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. Had some new subscribers over the weekend, which was nice. Starting to make up for the ones that I lost when we went from June to July, hoping that we get a few more. The algorithm, I'm stuck in a certain spot. Could be worse, but it's a lot better because people support the channel. If people didn't support the channel, things would be a little bit tight. They're already getting a little difficult, but, you know, we just persevere and hope that someday they just take the, what is it, the foot off of the brake pedal and allow the videos to get out there to a few more people. That would be nice. So don't forget to like the videos, share the videos, and put them on repeat play, but I don't think that really helps. But it's something I've said for a long time, so, you know, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, I guess. Anyway, folks, thanks for watching. God bless you all, and then God bless the entire world. See you soon.